The church bell tolled, a hollow clang that echoed through the empty streets of Elwood, Pennsylvania, as if mocking the silence in Caleb's heart. He stood outside his childhood home, the porch sagging under the weight of memories, his suitcase at his feet. At 28, he'd been cast out disowned for loving a man, his truth a sin too heavy for his family to bear. Caleb's breath hitched as he glanced at the front door, half expecting his mother to rush out, her arms open as they'd been when he was a boy. But the door stayed shut, the curtains still, and the weight of her last words, "You're no son of mine," pressed against his chest like a bruise. He'd come out to them at dinner, his voice trembling but resolute, hoping love would outweigh dogma. Instead, his father had slammed his fist on the table, and his mother had wept, not for him, but for the son she believed she'd lost to damnation. He turned away, the autumn air biting at his exposed neck, and walked toward the bus station. Elwood was a small town, its streets lined with clapboard houses and picket fences, a place where everyone knew your name but not your heart. Caleb had always been the quiet one, the kid who sketched wildflowers in notebooks and dreamed of a life beyond the county line. Now, at 28, he was a stranger in his own hometown, his identity a scandal whispered in church pews. At the bus stop, he met Ethan, 32, whose crooked smile and warm hazel eyes felt like a lifeline. Ethan had been in Elwood for only a year, a graphic designer who'd moved from Pittsburgh to escape a toxic relationship in a city that had grown too loud. His curly blonde hair caught the fading sunlight as he leaned against a lamppost, his duffel bag slung over one shoulder. "You look like you're running from something," Ethan said, his voice low but kind, the kind of voice that made you want to confess your secrets. Caleb hesitated, then nodded. "My family. They didn't take it well." He didn't need to elaborate. Ethan's eyes softened with understanding. He'd been through it too. His own coming out had cost him friends, a job, and a brother who hadn't spoken to him in years. "I'm heading to Philly," Ethan said. "Got a friend with a couch." "You?" "Nowhere," Caleb admitted, the word tasting like ash. He'd planned to crash at a motel until he figured things out, but his savings were thin, and Elwood's only motel was more roach than refuge. Ethan tilted his head, studying Caleb with a mix of curiosity and concern. "Come with me," he said, as if it were the simplest thing in the world. "Philly's big enough for new beginnings." Caleb stared at him, this stranger who offered salvation without knowing his last name. Something in Ethan's gaze steady, unguarded, made Caleb's chest ache with a hope he hadn't felt in years. He nodded, and they boarded the bus together, two outcasts bound by a shared wound, their futures uncertain but no longer solitary. In Philadelphia, the city hummed with possibility. Ethan's friend, Mara, a fiercely optimistic bartender in her 40s, welcomed them into her cramped but cozy apartment in Fishtown. The place smelled of coffee and patchouli, with mismatched furniture and walls covered in local art. Mara hugged Caleb like he was family, her warmth a stark contrast to the cold rejection he'd left behind. "You're safe here," she said, and for the first time in days, Caleb believed it. Ethan and Caleb spent their first weeks navigating the city, their bond growing through late-night talks over cheap takeout and walks along the Schuylkill River. Ethan was a storyteller, his humor sharp but never cruel, and he had a way of making Caleb feel seen not as a scandal, but as a man with dreams and fears. Caleb, in turn, shared his sketches, delicate drawings of flowers and cityscapes, each line revealing a piece of his guarded heart. But Elwood's shadow lingered. Caleb's phone buzzed with messages from old friends, some sympathetic, others accusing him of betraying his roots. One night, a voicemail from his sister, Hannah, broke him. "I miss you," she whispered, her voice cracking. "But Mom says you're choosing sin. I don't know what to think." Caleb replayed it until his eyes burned, the words carving deeper each time. Ethan found him on the apartment's fire escape, staring at the skyline, and sat beside him without speaking. They stayed there, shoulders brushing, until the city's lights blurred into dawn. Ethan, too, carried scars. He'd fled Pittsburgh after his ex, Ryan, had turned their relationship into a battleground of control and resentment. Coming out had cost Ethan his brother, who'd called him an embarrassment before cutting contact. Yet Ethan's optimism was a quiet rebellion, a refusal to let pain define him. He'd tease Caleb about his serious demeanor, coaxing smiles that felt like small victories. "You've got a good heart, Caleb," Ethan said one evening, their hands brushing as they split a pizza. "Don't let anyone make you forget that." As winter settled over Philadelphia, their friendship deepened into something unspoken but electric. Caleb noticed the way Ethan's laugh lines crinkled, the way his fingers lingered when passing a coffee mug. Ethan noticed Caleb's quiet courage, the way he'd sketch late into the night, pouring his pain into art. One snowy evening, as they walked through Rittenhouse Square, Ethan stopped under a street lamp, his breath visible in the cold. "I'm glad you're here," he said, his voice raw. Caleb's heart raced, and before he could overthink it, he closed the distance, their lips meeting in a kiss that felt like defiance and home all at once. Their love was a spark in the dark, but the world wasn't done testing them. Caleb's father sent a letter, not to reconcile but to demand he repent before it was too late. Ethan's ex, Ryan, reappeared, leaving voicemails that dripped with manipulation, threatening to expose Ethan's new life to his conservative clients. The city, for all its vibrancy, wasn't immune to prejudice. Strangers' stares and muttered slurs followed them in certain neighborhoods. Yet each challenge drew them closer, their love a shield against the world's cruelty. By spring, Caleb found work at a small art gallery, his sketches catching the eye of a curator who saw potential in his raw talent. Ethan landed freelance design gigs, his creativity thriving in a city that didn't demand he hide. They moved into a tiny studio apartment, its walls soon covered with Caleb's drawings and Ethan's colorful posters. It was theirs, a sanctuary built from resilience and shared dreams. But the past wasn't finished with them. A call from Hannah brought news that shook Caleb to his core. Their mother was sick, and the family expected him to return to Elwood not as a son, but as a penitent. Caleb's instinct was to refuse. But Ethan, ever the optimist, saw an opportunity. "Go back," he said, his hand squeezing Caleb's. "Not for them, but for you. Show them who you are." Caleb's heart pounded at the thought of facing his family, but Ethan's belief in him was a tether. They planned the trip together, knowing it would be a reckoning not just with his family, but with the town that had rejected him. As they packed, Ethan pulled Caleb close, whispering, "Whatever happens, we're in this together." Caleb nodded, his fear tempered by the certainty of Ethan's love, a love that had already begun to prove it could defeat anything. The bus ride back to Elwood felt like stepping into a memory Caleb had tried to bury. The rolling hills of Pennsylvania, dusted with early summer green, blurred past the window, but all he could see was the house he'd fled, its faded blue paint, the creak of the porch swing, the echo of his father's rage. Ethan sat beside him, his hand resting lightly on Caleb's knee, a silent reminder that he wasn't alone. They arrived in Elwood at dusk, the town quieter than Caleb remembered, as if it held its breath. The plan was simple: visit his mother, confront the past, and leave before the weight of judgment crushed them. But nothing in Elwood was ever simple. As they stepped off the bus, a group of teenagers near the gas station stared, their whispers sharp as knives. Ethan squeezed Caleb's hand, his smile defiant. "Let them talk," he murmured. "They don't know us." The hospital was a low brick building on the edge of town, its fluorescent lights harsh against the softening sky. Caleb's mother, Ellen, lay in a sterile room, her face gaunt but her eyes still sharp with the conviction that had driven a wedge between them. Hannah was there, her auburn hair pulled back, her expression torn between relief and unease. "You came," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Caleb nodded, unable to meet her gaze, his heart caught between love for his sister and the sting of her silence when he'd needed her most. Ellen's reaction was colder. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice weak but cutting. "Not with him." She glanced at Ethan, who stood by the door, his posture calm but his eyes alert. Caleb's chest tightened, the old wound reopening. "I'm here because you're my mother," he said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "But I'm not here to beg for your approval. I'm here to be seen." Ethan stepped forward, his presence a quiet strength. "Mrs. Harper, I'm Ethan. I love your son, and I'm not ashamed of it." His words hung in the air, bold and unapologetic. Ellen turned her face away, but Hannah's eyes widened, a flicker of admiration breaking through her uncertainty. The visit ended quickly, with no reconciliation, only a heavy silence that followed them back to the motel where they'd booked a room. That night, in the dim glow of a bedside lamp, Caleb broke. "Why did I think this would change anything?" he whispered, his voice cracking. Ethan pulled him close, his arms a safe harbor. "You didn't come here to change them," he said. "You came to show them you're whole, with or without their approval." Caleb buried his face in Ethan's shoulder, the warmth of his embrace easing the ache in his chest. The next day, word of their arrival had spread. Elwood's rumor mill churned, and by noon, Caleb's father, Thomas, was waiting outside the motel. His broad shoulders filled the doorway, his face a mask of fury and shame. "You're parading your sin in my town," he spat. "You think you can just waltz back here with him?" Caleb froze, but Ethan stepped between them, his voice calm but firm. "We're not here to fight, Mr. Harper. We're here for Caleb's mother. But if you want to talk about sin, maybe start with turning your back on your own son." Thomas's face reddened, but before he could respond, Hannah appeared, her voice shaking but resolute. "Dad, stop. He's still your son." It was the first time she'd spoken up, and Caleb's heart surged with a fragile hope. Thomas stormed off, but the encounter left Caleb rattled, his resolve wavering. Ethan, sensing his doubt, suggested they visit the old bridge where Caleb used to sketch as a teenager, a place of solace before everything fell apart. At the bridge, the stream below murmured softly, and the air smelled of damp earth and wildflowers. Caleb traced the worn wood with his fingers, memories flooding back. "I used to come here to escape," he said. "I'd draw for hours, pretending I could be someone else." Ethan sat beside him, his shoulder brushing Caleb's. "You don't need to be someone else," he said. "You're enough." The words hit Caleb like a revelation, and he leaned into Ethan, their kiss soft but fierce, a promise sealed in the heart of a town that had tried to break them. But Elwood wasn't done with them. That evening, a group of locals men Caleb recognized from church confronted them outside a diner. Their words were venomous, laced with Bible verses and accusations. Ethan stood his ground, his arm around Caleb, but the tension escalated when one man shoved Ethan, his shoulder hitting the diner's brick wall. Caleb's fear turned to fury. "Enough," he shouted, stepping forward. "You don't get to judge us. You don't get to decide who we love." The crowd dispersed, some with shame in their eyes, but the incident left Caleb and Ethan shaken. Back at the motel, they lay awake, the weight of the day pressing down. "Maybe we should leave," Caleb said, his voice hollow. Ethan turned to him, his eyes fierce with determination. "Not yet," he said. "We're not running. Not this time." He reached for Caleb's hand, their fingers intertwining. "We're stronger than their hate." The next morning, Hannah called, her voice urgent. "Mom wants to see you again," she said. "She's different. I don't know what changed, but she asked for you." Caleb's heart raced with a mix of hope and dread. Ethan squeezed his shoulder, his smile steady. "We'll face it together," he said. As they drove to the hospital, Caleb felt the weight of the past and the fragile promise of something new. His love for Ethan, the only certainty in a world that still fought to tear them apart. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and regret. A sterile cage for a woman Caleb barely recognized. Ellen lay propped against pillows, her hands frail but her eyes searching, softer than they'd been in years. Caleb stood at the foot of her bed, Ethan by his side, their hands brushing as if to anchor each other against the storm of the past. "Caleb," Ellen began, her voice a thin thread. "I've been wrong." The words hit like a thunderclap, unraveling years of pain in an instant. She spoke of sleepless nights, of wrestling with her faith, of a heart torn between doctrine and the son she'd pushed away. "I don't understand your life," she admitted, glancing at Ethan, "but I see the way he looks at you. It's real." Caleb's throat tightened, tears he hadn't shed in years burning his eyes. He wanted to believe her, to bridge the chasm that had opened when he'd come out. But trust was a fragile thing. Ethan squeezed his hand, a silent reminder to breathe. "I don't need you to understand," Caleb said, his voice steady but raw. "I just need you to see me." Hannah, sitting by their mother, nodded, her own eyes glistening. "I see you," she whispered, and for the first time, Caleb felt a flicker of the family he'd lost. The conversation was brief. Ellen was too weak for more, but it was a crack in the wall, a possibility of healing. As they left, Ethan pulled Caleb into a hug outside the hospital, the summer air warm against their skin. "You did it," Ethan murmured. "You showed up." But Elwood's judgment wasn't so easily softened. Word of Ellen's change of heart spread, and with it came a backlash. At the local coffee shop, Caleb overheard whispers, some supportive, others venomous. A former friend, Mark, approached them, his face twisted with disdain. "You think you can just come back and flaunt this?" He spat, gesturing at their joined hands. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice calm. "We're not flaunting. We're living." The confrontation drew a small crowd, and Caleb felt the old fear creeping in, the one that had kept him silent for years. But Ethan's presence grounded him, and he spoke up, his voice clear. "I'm not here to change your minds. I'm here to be myself. If that's too much for you, that's your burden, not mine." The crowd dispersed, some faces softening, others turning away, but Caleb felt lighter, as if he'd shed a piece of the shame he'd carried. Back in Philadelphia, their lives began to take shape. Caleb's work at the gallery earned him a small but growing reputation, his sketches of urban life and quiet moments with Ethan resonating with buyers. Ethan's freelance projects flourished, his designs bold and unapologetic, much like the man himself. Their studio apartment became a canvas for their love drawings pinned to walls. Ethan's vinyl record stacked by a second-hand player, a shared life built from scraps of resilience. But the past wasn't done clawing at them. Ethan's ex, Ryan, escalated his harassment, sending emails that alternated between pleas and threats. "You'll never be happy," one read. "You're fooling yourself with him." Ethan deleted them, but Caleb saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his smile faltered. One night, after a particularly cruel message, Ethan confessed, "I thought I'd left him behind, but he's still in my head." Caleb took Ethan's face in his hands, his thumbs brushing his cheekbones. He doesn't get to define you. We define us. They spent the night talking, unraveling the wounds Ryan had left. And by morning, Ethan's smile was back, brighter than ever. They decided to block Ryan's number, a small act of reclaiming their peace. In Elwood, Hannah became their bridge to the family. She visited Philadelphia, her first time in the city, and marveled at the life Caleb and Ethan had built. Over dinner at Mara's bar, she laughed at Ethan's stories and studied Caleb's sketches, her pride evident. "I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you sooner," she said, her voice breaking. Caleb hugged her, the weight of years lifting slightly. "You're here now?" he said. "That's enough." As summer faded into fall, Caleb and Ethan began to dream bigger. They talked of marriage not just as a legal bond, but as a statement to the world that had tried to tear them down. "Let's do it in Elwood," Ethan suggested one night, his eyes alight with mischief and conviction. "Right in the heart of the place that rejected you. Let's show them love wins." Caleb laughed, the idea both terrifying and exhilarating. "You're insane," he said, but the spark in Ethan's eyes was contagious. They began planning, not just a wedding but a celebration of everything they'd overcome. Mara offered to cater. Hannah promised to help with decorations. And even Ellen, still recovering, sent a hesitant but heartfelt note of support. The idea grew roots, a defiant act of joy in a town that had once cast them out. But as the wedding plans took shape, so did the resistance. Anonymous letters arrived at their apartment, filled with slurs and threats. A local pastor in Elwood preached against unnatural unions, his words fueling a small but vocal group determined to stop them. Caleb's resolve wavered, the fear of rejection resurfacing, but Ethan remained unshaken. "They don't get to write our story," he said, kissing Caleb's forehead. "We do." Planning a wedding in Elwood was like planting a flower in concrete possible, but it required breaking through. Caleb and Ethan returned to the town in late fall, their savings pooled for a small ceremony at the community park, the same park where Caleb had once sketched as a boy. The wooden bridge over the stream would be their altar, a symbol of crossing from pain to promise. Hannah threw herself into the preparations, her enthusiasm a quiet rebellion against their father's silence. She strung fairy lights along the bridge and arranged wildflowers in mason jars, her hands trembling with excitement and nerves. "This is going to be beautiful," she said, her smile bright, but her eyes wary of the town's reaction. Mara drove up from Philadelphia, her van packed with homemade pies and a fierce determination to make the day unforgettable. Even Ellen, still frail, promised to attend, a gesture that left Caleb reeling with cautious hope. But Elwood's resistance grew louder. The pastor's sermons had rallied a group of locals who called themselves defenders of faith. They posted flyers around town, accusing Caleb and Ethan of corrupting the community. One evening, as they hung decorations, a rock sailed through the air, narrowly missing Ethan's head. Caleb's heart stopped, but Ethan's laugh was sharp and defiant. "They're scared," he said, brushing off the incident. "Scared of what we represent." The incident shook Caleb more than he admitted. That night, in their motel room, he paced, his mind spiraling. "What if this is a mistake?" he asked, his voice low. "What if we're just asking for more pain?" Ethan sat on the bed, his hazel eyes steady. "We're not doing this for them, Caleb. We're doing it for us, for every kid in this town who feels like they don't belong. We're showing them they can survive." Ethan's words reignited Caleb's resolve, but the threats didn't stop. A petition circulated, demanding the park be closed on their wedding day. The town council, pressured by the vocal minority, scheduled a meeting to discuss it. Caleb and Ethan decided to attend, knowing their presence would be a statement. The meeting room was packed, the air thick with tension. The pastor spoke first, his voice booming with righteous fury, quoting scripture to justify exclusion. Then Caleb stood, his hands shaking but his voice clear. "I grew up here," he began. "I love this town, even when it didn't love me back. I'm not here to fight your beliefs. I'm here to marry the man I love, in the place that shaped me. If that scares you, ask yourself why." Ethan followed, his charm disarming even the skeptics. "We're not asking for your permission," he said. "We're asking for your humanity." The room fell silent, some faces softening, others hardening. Hannah spoke next, her voice breaking as she defended her brother. "He's my family," she said. "And so is Ethan. If you can't see that, you're the ones missing out." To Caleb's shock, a few locals clapped, their support a small but significant crack in the town's armor. The council voted to allow the wedding, a narrow victory that felt like a miracle. As the wedding day approached, Caleb and Ethan leaned on each other, their love a fortress against the town's lingering hostility. They finalized detailed simple vows, a playlist of their favorite songs, and suits borrowed from Mara's friend, a tailor with a flair for drama. Caleb's sketches became their invitations, each one a drawing of the bridge with a handwritten note. "Join us to celebrate love." The night before the wedding, Ellen called Caleb to her hospital room. She was stronger now, her eyes clearer. "I won't pretend I understand everything," she said, her voice soft. "But I want to be there tomorrow. For you." Caleb hugged her, tears streaming down his face, the weight of years lifting just enough to breathe. Ethan, waiting outside, wiped his own eyes when Caleb told him. "See," he said, grinning. "Love's winning already." But the morning of the wedding brought a new challenge. The defenders of faith planned a protest, their signs already piling up near the park. Caleb's stomach churned, but Ethan was unshaken. "Let them protest," he said, adjusting Caleb's tie. "They can't stop us." Mara arrived with reinforcements, friends from Philadelphia, artists and activists who'd heard their story and wanted to stand with them. The park began to fill, not just with protesters, but with allies, their presence a quiet defiance. As the ceremony hour approached, Caleb and Ethan stood together at the bridge, their hands clasped. The fairy lights glowed against the dusk, and the stream below whispered like an old friend. Hannah stood by their side, her smile radiant, and Ellen sat in the front row, her presence a fragile bridge to reconciliation. The crowd was a mix of supporters and skeptics, but Caleb's world narrowed to Ethan, the man who'd seen him, loved him, and fought for him. The officiant, a friend of Mara's who'd driven from Philly, began the ceremony, her voice warm and steady. Caleb's vows came first, his voice shaking but strong. "Ethan, you showed me I could be whole. I promise to love you, to fight for you, to build a life with you no matter what the world throws at us." Ethan's vows followed, his eyes locked on Caleb's. "Caleb, you're my home. I promise to stand by you, to make you laugh, to prove every day that love defeats everything." As they exchanged rings, the protesters' chants faded, drowned out by the cheers of their allies. Caleb kissed Ethan, the world falling away, their love a beacon in the heart of a town that had once turned them away. The kiss sealed their vows, a moment of triumph that echoed beyond the bridge. The crowd erupted, some in applause, others in stunned silence as Caleb and Ethan stood hand in hand, their rings glinting under the fairy lights. Elwood's Park, once a place of Caleb's solitude, now held their love, a testament to resilience in the face of rejection. The reception was modest but alive with joy. Mara's pies lined a makeshift table, and a local band, friends of Hannah's, played acoustic covers of songs Caleb and Ethan loved. Supporters danced under the stars, their laughter a counterpoint to the protesters' fading chants. Ellen, frail but present, sat with Hannah, her eyes soft as she watched Caleb sway with Ethan to a slow song. "I didn't know," she whispered to Hannah, her voice heavy with regret. "I didn't know love could look like this." But the night wasn't without tension. A few protesters lingered at the park's edge, their signs crude and hateful. One, a man Caleb recognized from his father's church, shouted, "You're defiling this town." Ethan, ever the optimist, raised his glass in a mock toast, his grin defiant. "To love?" he called, and the crowd echoed him, drowning out the hate. Caleb's heart swelled, his fear replaced by a fierce pride in the man he'd married. As the night wound down, Caleb and Ethan slipped away to the bridge, needing a moment alone. The stream below murmured, and the air smelled of honeysuckle and possibility. "We did it," Caleb said, his voice thick with emotion. Ethan pulled him close, their foreheads touching. "We're just getting started," he whispered, and they kissed again, the world theirs for that fleeting moment. Returning to Philadelphia felt like coming home, but Elwood's impact lingered. Caleb's sketches took on new depth, capturing the raw emotion of their wedding day. Ethan's smile, the fairy lights, the bridge that had witnessed their vows. The gallery showcased his work, and a local paper ran a story on their wedding, calling it a triumph of love over prejudice. The article went viral, shared across social media, and suddenly, Caleb and Ethan were symbols of something bigger. Messages poured in, some hateful, but most filled with gratitude. A teenager from a nearby town wrote, "I saw your story. It gave me hope I can be myself one day." Caleb read the letter aloud to Ethan, tears in his eyes. "This is why we did it," Ethan said, his voice soft but firm. "For them. For us." But the spotlight brought challenges. Ryan, Ethan's ex, resurfaced, leaving comments on the article that twisted their story into something ugly. "You're faking it for attention," he wrote, his words a dagger aimed at Ethan's heart. Caleb saw the pain in Ethan's eyes, the old wounds reopening. They sat together on their apartment's fire escape, the city humming below, and Caleb took Ethan's hand. "He's wrong," Caleb said. "What we have is real. He can't touch that." Ethan nodded, but the harassment didn't stop. Ryan's messages grew more aggressive, hinting at showing up in Philadelphia. Caleb, usually the cautious one, felt a protective fury rise. "We need to end this," he said, and they filed a restraining order, a legal line in the sand. It was a small victory, but it gave Ethan space to heal, his smile returning as he threw himself into new design projects. In Elwood, Hannah became their advocate, challenging the town's prejudices in small but meaningful ways. She started a book club at the library, including stories of diverse lives, and invited Ellen, who attended reluctantly but stayed. Slowly, the town began to shift, not all at once, but in quiet moments. A neighbor who'd once shunned Caleb brought over a pie, her apology unspoken but clear. The pastor's sermon softened, pressured by a congregation that had seen love triumph on that bridge. Caleb and Ethan's life together deepened. They adopted a scruffy dog, a mutt they named River after the stream that had witnessed their vows. Their apartment filled with laughter, late-night talks, and the comfort of routine. Caleb's art flourished, his gallery show selling out, and Ethan landed a contract with a major ad agency, his designs bold and unapologetic. But the past wasn't fully behind them. A call from Hannah brought news. Their father, Thomas, wanted to meet. Caleb's heart raced with a mix of dread and curiosity. Ethan, ever his anchor, offered to come, but Caleb shook his head. "I need to do this alone," he said, though the words felt like a leap into the unknown. Ethan kissed him, his trust unwavering. "You've got this," he said, "and I've got you." Caleb drove to Elwood alone, the familiar roads stirring memories of rejection and resilience. Thomas waited at the old diner, his face lined with years and regret. "I don't understand your life," he said, his voice gruff but softer than Caleb remembered. "But I don't want to lose you again." It wasn't an apology. Not fully. But it was a start, a crack in the wall that had separated them. Caleb nodded, his throat tight, and drove back to Philadelphia with a fragile hope, Ethan waiting to hear every detail. Back in Philadelphia, Caleb carried the weight of his father's words, a tentative olive branch that felt both foreign and precious. He shared the conversation with Ethan over coffee in their cluttered kitchen, Rivers snoring at their feet. Ethan listened, his hazel eyes steady, and when Caleb finished, he leaned across the table, kissing him softly. "You're building something new," Ethan said. "With him, with your mom, with this whole damn world." Their life settled into a rhythm of love and ambition. Caleb's art gained traction, his sketches now featured in a regional magazine, each piece a story of survival and joy. Ethan's design work caught the eye of a nonprofit advocating for LGBTQ rights, and he poured his heart into their campaigns, his creativity a quiet act of defiance. Their apartment, once a bare refuge, was now a home, walls lined with art, shelves heavy with books, and a couch where River claimed his spot. But the world outside their door remained unpredictable. The viral article about their wedding drew attention from unexpected places. A documentary filmmaker reached out, wanting to tell their story, and after much debate, Caleb and Ethan agreed. "It's not just about us," Caleb said, his voice firm. "It's about every kid who feels abandoned." The filming process was intense, pulling them back to Elwood to revisit the bridge, the hospital, the diner, places that held both pain and triumph. The documentary crew captured raw moments, Caleb sketching at the bridge, Ethan laughing with Mara, Hannah speaking fiercely about her brother's courage. Ellen, now stronger, shared her journey from rejection to acceptance, her voice breaking as she admitted her mistakes. The footage was powerful, but it reopened old wounds. Caleb struggled with the exposure, the fear of being judged again. But Ethan's hand in his was a constant reminder they were in this together. As the documentary took shape, so did their community. Mara's bar became a hub for their friends, artists, activists, and locals who'd been touched by their story. They hosted game nights, art shows, and fundraisers, their apartment too small for the growing circle of people who saw them as family. Hannah visited often, her bond with Caleb stronger than ever. And even Ellen made the trip once, her presence a quiet miracle. But not everyone celebrated their visibility. Ryan's harassment escalated, bypassing the restraining order with anonymous emails and social media accounts. "You'll never escape me," one message read, and Ethan's face paled as he deleted it. Caleb's protective instinct surged, and they hired a lawyer to track the messages, determined to end Ryan's hold over them. The process was draining, but it strengthened their resolve. "He doesn't get to win," Ethan said, his voice fierce. "Not now. Not ever." In Elwood, the documentary's early screenings stirred the town. Some locals embraced it, moved by Caleb and Ethan's love, while others doubled down, their prejudice louder in the face of change. The Defenders of Faith organized a counter-event, but it drew a smaller crowd than expected, their influence waning. Hannah reported that the library's book club was growing, with teenagers asking questions about identity and acceptance. "You're changing things," she told Caleb over the phone. "Even here." As winter approached, Caleb and Ethan planned their first anniversary. They returned to the bridge in Elwood, not for a ceremony, but for a quiet moment of reflection. The stream was icy, the air sharp, but the fairy lights Hannah had left up glowed softly. They stood together, wrapped in coats, their breath visible as they reminisced about their wedding day. "I'd do it all again," Ethan said, his voice thick. Caleb smiled, his heart full. "So would I?" The documentary premiered in Philadelphia to a packed theater. The audience a mix of strangers and friends. Caleb and Ethan sat in the back, hands clasped, as their story unfolded on screen: the pain of rejection, the joy of love, the defiance of their wedding. When the credits rolled, the crowd gave a standing ovation, and Caleb felt tears stream down his face. Ethan squeezed his hand, whispering, "We did that." The film's release brought more letters, more stories from people who'd found hope in their journey. A young man from a rural town wrote, "I came out to my parents because of you." A teacher shared how she'd used their story to start a conversation in her classroom. Each message was a reminder that their love was a ripple, touching lives they'd never meet. But the victory was bittersweet. Thomas reached out again, asking to meet in Philadelphia. Caleb agreed, nervous but hopeful. At a quiet cafe, Thomas sat across from him, his hands fidgeting. "I'm trying," he said, his voice gruff. "I don't know if I'll ever fully get it, but I want to know you." It was a small step, but it felt seismic. Caleb drove home, his heart lighter, and fell into Ethan's arms, the weight of the past easing just a little more. The documentary's success reshaped Caleb and Ethan's world, turning their love into a beacon for others. Invitations poured in, speaking engagements, art shows, even a request to write a book. Caleb hesitated, his instinct to stay private warring with the knowledge that their story mattered. Ethan, ever the dreamer, pushed gently. "We've got a chance to make a difference," he said, his eyes bright. "Let's take it." They began speaking at local events, sharing their journey with audiences who listened, some with tears, others with quiet awe. Caleb's sketches became part of their talks, each drawing a window into their struggles and triumphs. Ethan's humor lightened the heaviest moments, his hand always finding Caleb's when the memories stung. Their message was simple: love is worth fighting for, even when the world pushes back. In Elwood, change came slowly but steadily. Hannah's book club grew, drawing in parents and teens who wanted to understand. Ellen, now living at home, joined occasionally, her presence a quiet endorsement of Caleb's life. Thomas remained distant but sent a card for their anniversary, his handwriting stiff but sincere: "I'm proud of you." Caleb framed it, not because it erased the past, but because it marked a beginning. Ryan's harassment faded after legal pressure, his shadow retreating as Caleb and Ethan built a life too bright for his darkness to touch. They focused on their future, buying a small house in Philadelphia's suburbs, a fixer-upper with a garden where river chased squirrels. Caleb painted the walls with murals, each one a piece of their story, while Ethan designed a studio space for their work, their dreams now tangible. Their second year of marriage brought new challenges. Caleb's gallery pushed for a solo show, a chance to cement his name, but the pressure to produce weighed heavily. Ethan faced his own hurdles, balancing freelance work with the nonprofit's demands. They argued, sometimes small, human fights about dishes or schedules, but always came back to each other, their love a constant amid the chaos. One night, after a long day, they sat on their porch, the city's hum distant. Caleb sketched Ethan's profile, the lines of his face softer now, shaped by years of laughter and tears. "What are we doing next?" Caleb asked, half joking. Ethan grinned, his eyes mischievous. "World domination," he said, then softened. "Or maybe just keep loving each other, loud enough for the world to hear." Their story continued to ripple. The documentary won an award at a film festival, and they were invited to speak at a national conference for LGBTQ youth. Standing before hundreds, Caleb shared his journey from abandonment to acceptance, his voice steady as Ethan stood beside him. A teenager approached them afterward, her eyes wide. "I'm scared to come out," she said. Caleb knelt, meeting her gaze. "You don't have to do it alone," he said. "Find your people. They're out there." Back home, they hosted a barbecue, their backyard filled with friends Mara, Hannah, even Ellen, who brought a pie and a shy smile. Thomas didn't come, but he called later, his voice awkward but warm. "I saw you on TV," he said. "You looked happy." Caleb's heart ached with the weight of what might have been, but he focused on what was Ethan's hand in his. Their home, their love. As their third anniversary approached, Caleb and Ethan returned to Elwood, not to prove a point, but to celebrate where it all began. They stood on the bridge, now a local landmark for some, a symbol of love's defiance. The fairy lights were gone, but the stream still sang, and the air held the same promise it had on their wedding day. They renewed their vows, just the two of them, their words quieter but no less fierce. "I choose you," Caleb said, his voice thick. "Every day, every fight, every joy." Ethan's eyes glistened as he replied, "I choose you, Caleb. Always." They kissed, the world fading, their love a fire that had burned through rejection, hate, and doubt. The town had changed, not completely but enough. The library now had a pride flag in its window, and the pastor's sermons spoke more of love than judgment. Caleb's sketches hung in the diner, a quiet testament to his return. Elwood wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, a place they'd reclaimed with every step, every kiss, every vow. Years passed, and Caleb and Ethan's life became a tapestry of small victories and quiet joys. Their house in Philadelphia's suburbs bloomed with color wildflowers in the garden, Caleb's murals on the walls, Ethan's designs pinned above their shared desk. River, now gray around the muzzle, still bounded after squirrels, his bark a constant in their days. Their love, once a spark in a hostile world, had grown into a flame that warmed everyone around them. The documentary had a lasting impact, shown in schools and community centers, its message of resilience reaching thousands. Caleb and Ethan became mentors, hosting workshops for young artists and activists, their home a safe space for those navigating their own journeys. Letters still arrived, some from kids coming out, others from parents seeking to understand. Each one was a reminder of why they'd fought, why they'd stayed. Elwood continued to evolve. Hannah took over the library, turning it into a hub for inclusivity, with programs for queer youth and allies. Ellen volunteered there, her quiet presence a bridge between the town's past and its future. Thomas visited Philadelphia twice a year, his conversations with Caleb stilted but growing warmer, each meeting a step toward reconciliation. "I'm learning," he said once, his eyes avoiding Caleb's, but his voice sincere. It was enough. Caleb's art career soared, his solo show a critical success, his sketches now in galleries across the Northeast. Ethan's work with the nonprofit grew, his designs shaping campaigns that changed laws and hearts. They balanced their ambitions with their life together, carving out time for quiet nights, road trips, and mornings with River. Their love was no longer just a defiance, it was a foundation, a home they'd built from the ashes of rejection. One spring, they returned to Elwood for the library's first Pride event, a small but vibrant gathering. The bridge, now a local symbol, was decorated with rainbow flags, and Hannah had organized a mural project, with Caleb's sketches as the centerpiece. Kids painted alongside them, their laughter mingling with the stream's song. Ethan, ever the charmer, led a storytelling workshop, his voice drawing smiles from even the skeptics. As the sun set, Caleb and Ethan stood on the bridge, watching the town they'd once fled embrace a new chapter. A teenager approached, his voice shy. I saw your documentary, he said. It made me tell my mom I'm gay. She's here today. Caleb's eyes stung, and Ethan squeezed his hand. You're brave, Caleb told the boy. And you're not alone. That night, they stayed in Elwood, sleeping in Hannah's guest room. The town no longer a place of pain, but a piece of their story. They talked late into the night, dreaming of the Futuria trip to Europe. Maybe a second dog. Always more love. We proved it, Ethan said, his voice soft. Love defeats everything. The next morning, they drove back to Philadelphia, the road ahead open and bright. Caleb sketched in the passenger seat, capturing Ethan's profile against the sunrise, while Ethan hummed their wedding song. Their life wasn't perfect. There were still fights, doubts, and the weight of a world that didn't always understand. But they had each other, a love that had faced abandonment, hate, and fear, and emerged stronger. As they reached their house, River bounded to greet them, his tail a blur. Caleb hung his latest sketch, a drawing of the bridge, with two figures hand in hand. The words, "Love defeats everything," carved into the wood. It was their story, their truth, a testament to a love that had not only survived but thrived, changing hearts, towns, and lives along the way. In the quiet of their home, Caleb pulled Ethan close, their lips meeting in a kiss that held every promise they'd made. The world outside could challenge them, judge them, try to break them, but their love was unshakable, a force that had defeated everything and would carry them forward. Together, always.